Welcome to this online forum, and we're so glad you could be here, especially if you plan to be at the Civics Centre when Brigid and I both got the coronavirus. That was just incredibly bad timing, but here we are now. So thank you to Catholic Care and Communities for Children, Burnie, for the funding available for this to go ahead and the workshops that went on in March and April. We'll give you a brief introduction to TANA in a moment, and there's our key messages for today, which you'll see in the presentation. That child adversity, which is what we'll be discussing, and its effects is preventable, solvable. We're thinking about what we can do together to redesign policies and share a bit more about the science of what we can do, not just the problem, but the solution. TANA has always been solution focused. We'll invite you to join our community of care and ask you to give us some feedback at the end. This quote from Dr. Anthony Biglan, prevention scientist and behaviouralist. He worked with a group, the National Academy of Medicine Committee, and these are his words. It's officially from the committee, but he wrote these words, which we just think encapsulate TANA's intention for being. If we could make use of all the things we've learned in the last 50 years about prevention, we could ensure, if it was widely adopted, that virtually every young person arrived at adulthood with the skills, interests, values, and health habits they need to lead a productive life in caring relationships with other people. Brigid and I, just for a bit of background, have come out of education, still working in education in some capacity, and we've both worked across the spectrum from K to 12. So this was really driven by this deep desire to see that the young people that we interact with really do find that capacity to build relationships. And we've all seen, if we're of a similar age, that there seems to be a lot more reticence amongst young people to share because they feel, the social media judgments, etc. It becomes such a pronounced problem. So our mission is to make complex trauma common knowledge, and we've set a target of 2030 for that. Our objectives officially raise awareness of complex trauma in the first instance, because a lot of people still don't know about it. Go further with that and educate about the effects of toxic stress and the science of resilience and thriving, which we'll get into today. And with that collective awareness growing and growing, then we become a stronger advocacy group for policies that consider this fundamental science and help prevent way upstream from this becoming an ongoing issue through future generations. The N in TANA is for network. It's trauma awareness as a fundamental underpinning for so much of the good work that's being done already, but not always taking effect because it's not addressing the root of the problem. So our key message is that root causes, if complex trauma is an underlying root cause, it needs to be addressed. And we need grassroots solutions. We need this in as many people, as many minds, as many homes, as many hearts as possible. And it doesn't matter if you don't work with children. We live in the world together. And so the grassroots solution is widespread trauma awareness, because it's scientifically proven that this underpins both individual and community self-healing. We'll give you an example of a self-healing community model, and we all ultimately have to do our own self-healing of whatever limitations we believe about ourselves. So there's our key takeaways, that child adversity is in fact a shared responsibility because it's a public issue. It is preventable. It seems like such an intractable problem, and it did to us at first. But we know that when we work together, we can achieve prevention of this getting any worse, and that it's solvable for people who are suffering right now. With a common understanding, we believe we can help in the healing process right now. And how do we do that? Well, we join together, and we've created TANA for that purpose, and that gives us a collective voice. And we want statewide community awareness in the first instance. We'd love to see Tasmania being the first fully trauma-informed state in Australia, and then show the mainland how to do it. Brigid, I'll pass over to Brigid, who is
Thank you for
our
that.
chief
Welcome.
researcher. So you'll figure that out very soon. Thanks, Brigid.
Thank you. This is a beautiful infographic that really sums up so much for me and for TANA, and why we are adamantly grassroots. As Sue mentioned, we're involved in the education system, and we saw so much good work happening in education and so many good people working in education, feeling more and more stressed and more more effort, more and more effort going in, and all these inputs into the education system, and still we had kids coming through suffering from the effects of adversity. And Dr. Robert Anda was involved in the very first original adverse childhood experiences research and study, along with Dr. Vince Folletti. These two men are responsible for sharing with the world the science that adverse experiences that happen in childhood have an echo right through down through the lifetime, and indeed into epigenetics, so into the following generations. So Dr. Robert Anda originally thought, wow, this information is so powerful. I need to go and tell all the doctors. And once the doctors hear this, we're going to have change. It's going to work. So he spent his first 10 years after the ACEs study going in, sharing this information about the impact of adverse childhood experiences with doctors. And he didn't see a great change. He didn't see a great shift. And he wondered why. He linked up with Dr. Laura Porter. She was involved in planning, and she was involved in the self-healing communities model. And her philosophy and what's worked for the self-healing communities model is that it must come from the base. It must come from the whole population with this deep understanding of the science of adversity. So after 10 years, Dr. Robert Anda and Dr. Laura Porter decided to stop doing talks to specific services and systems and to focus on a population. And they created this infograph, which they say, if we cannot move the wheel of population by awareness, the cogs on the wheels of the other systems will get burnt out. They'll get worn down, they'll get burnt out. If we can get a population aware, they in turn will make it so much easier for all the other service providers to do their job beautifully. So that really sums up for me the power of this infograph and the power of why TANA is right there at the population level, distributing this information out of population. So everyone in their own sphere of influence can share this information, and we can all hopefully have a pretty fast turnover of everyone understanding this information, because it's not complex, but it's completely based in science. So the self-healing communities model, Washington State implemented a self-healing communities model, and it took them 14 years, so it says from 10 to 15 years, but they had the most amazing results from the self-healing communities model, which was empowering communities with the information about ACEs, and then empowering them to engage in collective impact and work with service providers as to what they wanted. And now that model has been taken across the board in America and in Wales and Scotland as well. So you can see some of the results there. We had births to teen mothers down 62% and infant mortality down 43%. We have youth suicides and suicide attempts went down 98%. The self-healing communities is something that has been proven to work. And we really were really keen to see this model aspects of this model being taken up in Tasmania. So Laura Porter did a lot of research. ACE Interface is the name of her organization with Dr. Robert Anda. And they really found that in communities that help heal each other, there's a few things that really help. One of them is that you have someone in your life who will come and help you in a practical way if you need it. And that was found to reduce the incidence of depression by a massive amount. They researched what's the difference between people who are suffering from severe depression, and then they tried to look at people in the same situations but who didn't suffer from depression. And one of the big things that came out was that the people who didn't suffer from depression had someone in their life that they could rely on, that they could call on. Laura Porter used the example of the washing machine's broken, and I know that there's someone there I can call, and I know that washing machine, they'll come and help me. Yeah, so just practical help. That's how we can help our neighbor. Reciprocity is massively important. So it's not all about just someone helping and someone being helped. We all take on the role of the helper and the helped. I think that's very, very important for empowerment, that we don't have that mindset of just one or the other. We're creators. We give and we take, and we reciprocate help, and we share kindness. Obviously, living in a safe, stable, nurturing environment is massively important in every context. You know, obviously the home, the school, the library environment, you know, everywhere they go, the hospitals, the doctor's surgery, safe, stable, nurturing environment is the context of their life to keep them healthy. And an interesting one at the end here is having a bridging person in your life. So that's having a circle of friends who have having different circle of friends, or having someone in your life who's different to you, different upbringing, different circle of friends, different education, just a different perspective on things that you trust, that you can invite into your life, and that they in turn link you to resources, people that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. So the bridging, and we feel TANA's a bit like that, you know, we're there and we share information, and we all come together, and we are all so different. Members of TANA, we're all completely different, but we bridge each other and we help each other link into new things. So that's the help that helps from Dr. Robert Anda and Laura Porter.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. I haven't heard you say it like that before, but that's true. That is what the TANA community is. Even Mike and Brigid and I are so different, but we feel we've come together with different skills to make this work that none of us could do alone.
I do get excited about these types of conversations because I know the value in becoming enthusiastic about what you could possibly do. You know, when we get so much negative information about our community, we feel like it's daunting. But if we all do our part, and this is what I'm going to stress now, is that we need to understand the trusting relationships we have with those 3 or 4 people that are involved with maybe giving someone else a hand up. If we're respectively knowing about the person we're caring for, and we realize the part we play, therein lies the gold. And I have many examples of that over the years where I wanted to help somebody, but I go back to the people who are overseeing the help of a family and saying, is this okay if I do this and that? And you have that coordinated effort. It's a hand up, because in general, we have to do this collectively, because it's the reciprocating thing that needs to happen, as Brigid said. You know, it's very important that there's a give and a take that happens regularly. That becomes the enabling factor. Thank you, Sue.
That's okay. You've segued in perfectly, because the next slide is literally this, and I'll stop sharing in a minute, just show you the. So we'd like to just pause for a moment and hear from you. We've given you a sort of a quick and pretty powerful overview of some ideas that are intuitively we know, but the fact that this is all backed by science, and it's the latest science that the American Society of Pediatrics are saying this is what we need, and all of the science that we've come across is pointing to it's got to happen at a community level. That's the key. The government can't do it on their own. We've got to have community groups getting together and doing it, and that's what we've been essentially preparing for the last 4 years. So we'd love to know what brings you here today. What do you want to contribute to build your community? What are the thoughts that you have when you're at work or in your day-to-day life, in your home life, wherever it is, personally or professionally? What do you think about that you want to contribute to the community, that you'd like to see happen that isn't already happening? Because our collective contribution is the key. When we realise that every little contribution that we make that's positive and that supports a safe, stable, nurturing relationships within the community, they actually mitigate the effects, buffer the effects of adversity that may be experienced even while it's happening. All those positive experiences make a difference, which we'll go into more later. What do you hope to see happen that you think about, like you feel like you've got part of the solution, but it's not happening yet? And what could we do? How could we make this happen? What contribution do you want to bring? And what brings you to this meeting today? There's 2 parts to the question.
What brings me here? I went through a lot of trauma myself as a child, and I'm very passionate about helping other people and just wanting to know how to do that and how best to deal with that sort of thing. I've just started working in schools too as a teacher's aide, so I think I don't really know what to expect, but yeah, I'm very interested.
Thank you. And your lived experience is invaluable in being part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks. Is it Taylor?
Thank you.
Because I kept
Chantel.
Oh, Chantel. Okay, I couldn't see you, that's all. Jump in. Have you finished, Chantel?
Yes.
Yeah. I might just ask you to press mute on your microphone and we'll hear
Yep.
from Chandel.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm here in my new role with Burnie Works. So I've just taken on a role that'll happen within the qualitative data kind of collection space. And so recognising and being mindful of people's stories and the trauma that can come with that. So that's kind of why I'm here, getting my knowledge up to speed there. And then alternatively, it's about, recognising and being mindful that we all are who we are because of the trauma that we've been through and the way we act. And so just wanting to keep that kind of at the forefront in everything that I do, rather than kind of, taking things personally or reacting straight away, just kind of having it at the forefront so that it allows me to, take a breath and have some space and go from there. So
Beautiful. Yeah, understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of what we've envisioned with the TANA community, that we have. The purpose is to see that people can consider the reasons, be mindful, as you said, of the reasons behind behaviour.
Yeah. Lovely.
Suspending judgment, sensitive, responsive. Meg.
Yeah, hi. I've been wanting to be involved in TANA for ages. I know Mike Lizotte, we've known each other for a long time. And know his beautiful Mika as well, and Pip Ray, and I'd like to say hello to Kate too, because Kate and I were actually involved in Communities for Children back in 2006.
Anyway, so good to have you here.
Bit older and grumpier. The reason I'm interested is because I actually work in health. I'm a diabetes educator, and look at a lot of health issues, certainly a lot of chronic health issues, definite consequence of previous trauma, particularly in childhood, and just breaks my heart really, the journey that a lot of people have lived. And I guess my motto is, think of the kindest way I can do this in all things.
Thank you.
That's me.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful these are the sorts of things we could capture and pop on the website and, have things in one place that people can access, the gold that everybody has to share.
And I mean, the other thing too in health, there are a lot of unkind people, and it just, that tears me apart too. And just one of my colleagues went through a cancer experience and, dealing with some of the complexities of managing cancer is hard enough, but having unkind people at the desk is just an added trauma, which I don't think is necessary. So I think we need to stand up and speak up when people are unkind to us, particularly in health, because they're not should be kind people in all aspects of health.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sharon, welcome. Obviously, if your camera's on, you're an easy target. Hi, Sharon. Would you feel okay about sharing?
Guess you're talking to me.
Yes. Where have you come from, Sharon?
So I live in Burnie, and I've been trying to connect with you guys for a while. I went to an event at the Civic Centre on a rainy day, twisted my ankle, couldn't get in, finally got in, and it was cancelled. So so I've had, and then a few missed connections. But I was working as a clinical hypnotherapist working with trauma clients, so that was part of my interest. And I've been looking around, trauma for a while. And really interested, and I have a background myself in personally experiencing trauma too. So, but at the minute taking a break from my clinical hypnotherapy because I'm a bit, it's a bit of a crisis of confidence maybe. But yeah, and I work as a behaviour support practitioner. So yeah, I agree, and I'd like to get involved in helping and offering support. I always find that, like, I'll meet somebody and I think there's a need there, and I will offer some help, like just let me know what I can do, or can I help with childcare or what in a practical way, and no one will ever take me up on the offer. So I think that's a real issue. I think people don't want to reach out and they don't want to be beholden to someone maybe, and there's a number of barriers there, I think. So I think that's something that I'd like to know more about, like how people are getting around that.
Can I just add there that Laura Porter comments on that as well, and she said, she makes a comment, everybody wants to be the helper, no one wants to be the helped. And so she comments on that, and that it's slow process. Like 14 years it took for the Cowlitz County to turn around and get those results. So it is, and that's why TANA, we've been on it for 4 years. Like, it's a really slow process. Yeah.
Do you mind if I add something to that conversation?
Yeah, sure.
So I've, as I said, I've started a new role, but my previous role was at the Burnie Community House. So we did a lot of work around reframing help to be support, and didn't use the word help at all in anything that we did. And we found, like, it took a long time, a very long time, but we found that those that we were reaching out to would much rather take some support rather than help. So I just don't know if it's a language thing. But just something to consider, that's all.
Yeah, I'll write that down. That's excellent.
Yeah, words are powerful. I mean, words carry, everything. So yeah, that's great. And that's what we'll get into that today too. Thanks for that offering. Really appreciate it. And anybody else? Pete Rissy, I see you here.
Well, I've been here, but with no camera. I haven't done my hair today. So. My wish is for everyday society to become trauma literate, and my experience as a healthcare professional involved in education is we really need to dumb it down into some kind of a common denominator with education awareness at the level that we're at. And, by using this information, if we could get everybody to have a simple message to respond and not react, if you're a parent, if you're an employer, if you're an official, if you're a child, whatever, and, just to get it down to a point where it's not anything we have to think on, it just happens. So I think it's a generational thing. I think it'll probably be, not us that will be handing off the baton. It'll be our children and younger people, because it has to become just a part of the culture of our society, and that's going to take time. I've mentioned this before. Like, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time, and that's what this is. It's, I think, a longer term thing, and we just have to keep working it.
It is. I'd like to thank you, first of all, and outline something that really helped me is the way that the Johnson City model talks about it is that trauma awareness is the first step. And TANA has always been about self-awareness. So it's always twofold. It's self and other awareness. So first step is trauma awareness. I understand myself. This means that maybe there's nothing wrong with me. It's what happened to me. And I can start to separate. And these are the conversations that TANA will continue to have to help this unpacking and this healing process. First, trauma awareness. The more I understand and have compassion for myself, the more I automatically do for others. Trauma sensitivity. So I become more sensitive to myself and others with this awareness. And then that causes trauma responsiveness. I respond differently to others as well. I see that behavior and I say, are you okay? Instead of, or what's happened? Instead of, it's your problem. The more we build in those trauma responses, the more we have a trauma-informed society. So it is slow, and it requires people to do their own healing, but that happens much more readily when they know there's a community of people doing their own healing. Because it's like the fact that I'm not alone in this makes all the difference. Oh my God, people are talking about this now. That's what happened when we ran our first forum. I had a woman text me and say, I cannot believe that I can talk about this now. It happened when I was a child. I'm in my 60s. I saw a doctor. I told my family when I was 56, and they abandoned me. You know, so the worst fear was realised, but the fact that there was a community conversation starting was huge relief. So you're right, it is one bite at a time. But the more you participate in this conversation, the more you will realise that trauma awareness is a key. It's an underpinning that is essential and will make a difference. Would anybody else like to share before we continue? Yes, we've got a few things in the chat here. Let me just open that up.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that.
Can you see them, Brigid?
Yeah. So Wendy just chatted about. I'm sharing an office, so I'll type my response. I'm keen to learn more about the impact of trauma and to inform others in my community. Beautiful, beautiful. I'd like to also see more mentors in the community, especially for families. So thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, Mike, that music to Mike's ears, especially, that's his passion, his love, is to have that community mentorship active. So thank you, Wendy. And then Sharon mentioned about PACES. So PACES, yeah, so we have joined, you know, because we're not funded, we don't have time for everything. So yeah, so we've definitely joined it and keep an eye on it. And we definitely want to do more on the PACES community. And Gabor Mate, has anyone undergone the Gabor Mate training in compassionate inquiry?
Gabor Mate has been one of our inspirations, and the Wisdom of Trauma movie event is being, we've got that running in Devonport in June next month. So we'll make sure that you will get and there's a panel of experts inquiry, the Rivendell Clinic in Burnie. They're going to be on stage for a conversation after the film. Beautiful work that Gabor Mate has been doing. All right, I might just continue with the presentation because we'll get through and then we'll have as much time as we want for the conversation. We have an awareness that it's always an issue of resources with everything, because there's, you know, people talk about the competition for resources and they tend to be finite, but community awareness, again, we just keep bringing it back to the community awareness, activating more people in the community by helping them feel supported in their own healing process, grow this awareness. That's where the power can come in beyond what government resources might be available. But on the other side of that, there's the opportunity for more government resources to go where they're needed, the more the community is empowered as one voice, calling for the resources to go where they're needed. And people tend not to do that because when they're stuck in their survival mode, they're just not able to think beyond that. So we see huge capacity for the community to become a great resource. Brigid, can you speak further to this slide?
I think you've said it beautifully there, that with knowledge comes power, and Mike referred to it as well, is that we have knowledge to share widely, freely to share, and that knowledge empowers people to be mindful in their actions and interactions, and to do that with intent, knowing that there's so much more power behind that act of kindness, that we're literally building a brain, as Mike said, and creating a community, supporting each other regardless of our role, you know, regardless of what our paid official role is. We all have a role to play in our communities, and taking back that responsibility. Actually, it's taking back the responsibility, because with the responsibility comes the power, comes your own power as well, to have an impact and have an influence. So it's really reclaiming power and responsibility for everyone's good, I would say.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the way you said it too.
Thank you.
We'll just share this because a lot of you probably have come across, and we've got a lot of data on America. But the Professor Ben Matthews of the Queensland University has been working through Australia's data, and it's the first ever data collected in Australia. So they've called it the maltreatment study, And the reason for running this study is that child maltreatment is common. It's so common and it's widespread, more so than people realise. And they're the in brackets are just the elements of what that means for this study, which aligns with the ACEs study, and that it's always harmful as well. And just using the example of psychological trauma as an impact. He's got some statistics there on the depressive orders that are directly correlated with child maltreatment, anxiety disorders and self-harm, which are, pretty huge numbers. So the effect of mitigating and preventing is, it's a world that we can only imagine at this stage when we look at those kind of numbers. The UN Sustainable Development Goals have child maltreatment as a major public health issue, and we're part of that organisations. So our governments are required to report on their efforts. That was part of what Ben Matthews used to get the funding for this study. It's running from 2019 to 2023. So they have, you can find that easily on the internet if you'd like to get an update. The example that he used on the last video update, which was I think October 2020, was that in the return, we have got an update on this, but I've still got this one on the screen. The single year cost 2016 to 17 was in excess of $5 billion. That's the government services, the spending in government services. And that was just for the, putting out the fires of child protection, out of home care, the intensive, we need help now. That doesn't count downstream costs. So just on that, the amount of funding that we could have available for the recovery and healing process if we focused on prevention. Anything else to add there, Brigid?
Can I just add that it was public willingness to talk about this that allowed this to happen in Australia. It was a willingness for politicians, a willingness of some politicians to have an inquiry into institutionalized childhood sexual abuse, and it was the changing mores and the changing willingness of everyday people to talk about child adversity allowed this to happen. It's another example of each one of us being willing to talk about this and being willing to bear witness to the suffering of our children. Everyone's voice counts, and every member of TANA has contributed to this conversation and will continue to do so just by empowering TANA to say this is an issue that we demand action upon.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know about the ACEs study, we haven't got a lot here today, but the essence of it is that these are the types of ACEs that were talked about, similar to what Ben Matthews had. The original study was conducted in 1998 by Robert Ander, who had that infographic on the gears and the cogs, and Vince Folletti, amongst others. And they were questioning people on their experience of emotional, physical or sexual abuse, emotional or physical neglect before the age of 18, and household dysfunction, such as a parent with mental illness, witnessing domestic violence and losing a parent to divorce or separation, incarceration and substance misuse. But the expansion of ACEs studies throughout the US has included things like the impacts of bullying and community violence and racism and those others that you see there. But you can see that it's this data from the CDC. This is an excellent website to have a look at, Veto Violence, because this is a much bigger infographic. I just captured this bit to explain the basics of the ACE study. But, there's 61% there. Some people say up to 70% of any given population is experienced at least one ACE, but the significance is in 4 or more ACEs, because that's when we see predictable lifelong health, social and even financial difficulties. And as our friend in Tennessee, Becky Haas, says, what's predictable is preventable. Brigid, feel free to
Oh yeah, no,
add.
you're doing a beautiful job. Thank you.
You've always got so much to share, but we didn't want to go too much into the problem, but more into the solution. And just need to give that background on what problem we are addressing. And I'm sure you all know, but we do highly recommend getting in and having a bit more of a look at that ACEs study if you haven't already. But the key messages, of course, are that this is a public issue. It's not, I think some people. I still heard somebody the other day talk about, those people. It's never been that way for us. Well, hang on a minute. This is not just those people over there. This is the doctors, lawyers, teachers. This is a public issue. This is about the structure of society that has helped to cause this. Mental health is socially constructed. Therefore, we have a shared responsibility for social solutions. And that stems from the basic premise that we do know, not only believe, but know for sure that every child is born with great potential and great promise. And our society really needs that from the individual. Every one of us has our own gift to give. And we need to be drawing that out of our people as a sort of fundamental way of operating a society. We have a shared obligation, therefore, to foster and nurture our young people, to draw out that potential. We have a collective responsibility, therefore, to prevent violence, and certainly children's witnessing violence and encountering it. We need to buffer them, and we'll talk about that momentarily. We've got to be about learning and growing and contributing. And every policy at that level that we need to set, we need to be protecting families from undue stress, and we need children to have as much mum and dad time as possible, however that works for the family. We need to, as a society, make sure that we're offering that through even at the policy level, because policies can prevent child abuse and neglect. And when we do that, we obviously have greater community well-being. It is preventable. Social conditions and context are what shape family life and all of our experiences. And we use the metaphor here of the vehicle that's overloaded. It stops moving if you overload it too much. And when parents are overburdened, feeling overloaded, it does make it harder for them to be there for their kids as needed. And I'm sure if you're a parent, we've all had our moments of that. Significant stresses that we're talking about more broadly as a social issue is poverty and financial instability that we know a lot of people on the coast experience. We've got the housing insecurity that has just, really zoomed into the limelight, and just basic hunger. We know that children come to school hungry, and that's apart from lack of sleep, and we could go on. But our actions now, everything that we do now affects the future. So there's never a moment that, it's never something to be put off. And the solution that we're proposing as an organised group is to lighten the load, lessen that. So how do these ideas resonate, and how do they impact on what you're doing? Perhaps somebody has had thoughts come to mind as we've been sharing those slides and having that conversation. Just give you a moment to think about a contribution. What do you think? Is it solvable? Is it preventable? Does that challenge you to think that way? Do you absolutely believe it's true?
For all this, it all comes down to the unconditional love, and it's that the intentional and the intellectually. We have to intellectually go about. We have to know. We have to be aware. How do we be aware? By getting to know more of what the problem is, understanding what the problem is. And the more of us do, and I see this as a beautiful way to sort of explain. I don't know how many times you've seen someone with a road rage. For years now, I guess every time I see someone who's really doing something silly and doing road rage, I automatically go, oh my gosh, I wonder what happened to him, But I guess the point is that more of us that we go more and more like me, and I know this, we're probably preaching to the converted here, because I think that's why it's so quiet this morning, is that, the more of us that have that attitude of when you see someone reacting instead of responding, you go, oh my goodness, wonder what happened to that person, and to get him to be to this point, or get her to be that point. That was one issue. And so I know that the biggest thing is understanding what is the problem, what is the root cause, what's the thing called
root causes need grassroots solutions.
Root causes need grassroots solutions, and that means all of us have to understand what happened to the folks that we see acting and reacting like that they do.
It's sometimes difficult, like you said, Meg, when we all do it, but to see, the unkind health worker or the unkind teacher, but then it's the same thing, oh, I wonder what happened to, what happened there.
Yeah.
And not in judgment, just in a genuine care for human beings.
It is starting the conversation. My son's partner is a midwife, and she works in the hospital here in the Northwest, and she often comes home and says to me, oh my goodness, I wish we could get some of this information to the people I work with, because they're always dumbing their nose down at the pregnant mom that comes in, who they think shouldn't be pregnant, in the first place. And now she's coming in here complaining about this and that, and you could see the judgment that they lay on these people, and it's just she feels it, and she's so sad because she feels she can't do anything about it, and so she reacts to them in a cold like way and says nothing and just gets on with her work, and she feels stuck in this, can't do anything about it. I'm trying to encourage her now more and more to be yourself and role model the responses, and it's the best you can do for now. We all need to role model it for starters.
Well, I'm old and grumpy though, and I call them out.
That's it. I was going to say that, Meg.
Especially in the maternity suite, I call them out.
Yes.
My age, I can get away with it, and they say, "Oh, what's wrong with her?" But
yeah, Meg,
it's the unkindness.
I was thinking that too. Like sometimes the behaviour is bad behaviour, and that does need to be called out. People need to take responsibility for their impact on others, and that's how I do that too, as a teacher. And kids appreciate it. People appreciate it because everybody wants to know where the boundary is. What can I get away with? And it's like, no, that's actually really mean what you just said, or that really hurt. Like just being able to respond that way and let people know. You really might not realise, but that was, that had you need to understand your impact on people, and when you yell like that.
Yeah, I think younger people find it harder, but I often say things like, well, if I knew someone said that about me, I'd be really hurt. That usually does stop people.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, and words have power. Spoken words can't be taken back.
Yeah, and that's teaching empathy, Meg. I mean, that's an explicit teaching of empathy. Yeah.
I had.
And I think it's actually.
Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm just saying, all the years I've probably been I've been nursing since 1972, and I feel like the space has got less kind.
There's a whole conversation, so much conversation we could have about, the impact of social media and things like that too.
I think if Tim is there too, I'm sure Tim would have something to say about that too. He does talk about the change in healthcare over the years. And Meg, Tim McCarthy, he's here. He would fully agree with you on the change of values and focus and the overtaking of bureaucracy and paperwork instead of just the kindness and caring for the patients and older people in care as well. He talks about that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Even small things like repeating something for a person who's a little bit deaf, instead of this, oh, you didn't hear me the first time, I'm not going to repeat it. Like, what's all that about? Just be kind.
Yes. And part of that could be the overload. We talked about the overloaded systems, and we're really well aware people are burning out. So part of the overload is not just on parents, but on any frontline worker who is just so overwhelmed that they, you do get to a point where you might snap, and that might not normally be your mode of operating, or certainly not if you had enough sleep and have all your needs met. So yeah, the overload metaphor extends to
that's very true. That vicarious trauma, where the the need just seems so huge, and the burnout, just the absolute burnout. Like, self-care doesn't come naturally to everybody until we're explicitly aware of we have to look after ourselves in order to be able to care for anyone else.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm going to pop because we will have time if we pop through, but something that we do have, it is 5 to was about to share the screen again, but it is 5 to 11. Just wondering if people would like a 5-minute breather, toilet break, grab a cup of tea, just 5 minutes, and we'll hop off for 5 minutes. I'll be here, and we'll resume at 11. What we're coming back to is sharing the language that we can use, the common language that we can all use, that will help people understand more about what this issue is and what we can do about it. So look forward to that. Building Strong Brains, Tasmania. Back in a minute.
Okay.
Research projects currently underway in the northwest of Tassie. Look, I don't know about that either. In our initial forum in January 2019, we called for local data, and we spoke to Professor Ben Matthews at the time, and he said that was when he just found out that he just told us that he was about to do Australia's first study and that nobody has local data in Australia, but they do in America. So we thought that that would be useful. We relaxed on that idea because it was being looked after at that higher level, and it's still something though that if the community wants, it could be done. But do Mike or Brigid know of any related research projects in northwest Tasmania at the moment?
Not that I know of. No. No.
We'd really like to have the university evaluate our trauma awareness approach at the grassroots level. We'd like to see that we'd like to prove the concept that widespread trauma awareness can make a difference. We'd like that to become evidence.
Remember, Sue, there was down by Hobart. Remember, the University of Tasmania was involved with a project through, after the first forum, they came to our first forum at Elphiston, and then they went back to Hobart, and I think it was at Bridgewater. There was a community through what is the name of it? So down in the university in Hobart, there was the legal and policing, and there was a research on not legal but policing. And they got funding to do some research on trauma awareness at a community level, but I don't think they've released the results yet. So that was one that they were inspired by TANA, and they went ahead and they got the funding there, and that was UTAS. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I'm sure we could find a link for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, that'd be good to have. Yeah, be good to have a contact person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, come on.
I was going to say I wouldn't mind betting that levels of trauma are probably worse in Tasmania, or fairly bad in Tasmania as compared to other places, because of the degree of intergenerational, disadvantage and, trauma and things like that. We're known to be a bit of a hotbed for other, issues across the northwest. And it would give us, sort of political clout, I guess, if we had some data to demonstrate that,
Yeah, certainly there's a shift in culture in terms of even measuring it. I remember the Children's Commissioner from just a few years ago now, her report said, please, has anyone got any data on this? Because nothing is available. No one is sharing their data. Services are keeping hold of it. Sometimes they're not even measuring it. Now that was only about most
2018, I think, that report. Yeah.
There has been a huge cultural shift in the last 4 years of actually a willingness to measure and release the data. It's been phenomenal, the shift in culture around this, and science has contributed. We'd like to think that we've had a part to play in that, to open up the public discussion and the importance of science and we went to Jeremy Rockcliffe and told him that the World Health Organization now recognizes childhood adversity as a cause for PTSD, a diagnosable disability that can, he didn't know that at the time. Yeah. So it's happening, and it's huge.
And the Tasmanian government has been responsive. We've got, at the community of care meeting, we had a person join he's starting on the 1st of June at UTAS from WA as the first Professor of Trauma Informed Pedagogy. So she's going to trauma inform all the teachers in training, and she was ecstatic about this. She said, "You are so far ahead, I can't believe it. Tasmania's, doing this," because they still operate under a punitive system over there, she was saying. So, Kate, have you got, can you hear now? Oh, good. Okay. Always the only option that I think of would be to hop out and in again.
Yeah,
I'm just going to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
It was just a setting. Yeah, it's fine. Sorry.
Oh, fantastic.
I
Thank
didn't
you.
realize that I was.
That's really good. I'm glad we're all in communication again. This is really important. This is the takeaway. This is the work. So we partnered with the Tennessee Commission for Children and Youth when we found that they had this wonderful program that they've developed with the Frameworks Institute, which they talk about the metaphors. Sorry, I'll just click this into place. Building Strong Brains. It was Building Strong Brains Tennessee that we were trained with, and it's a train the trainer program. But they basically, a metaphor is using language that helps people, internalize knowledge. And so when we talk, the discomfort that a lot of people have with talking about this issue is not really understanding it. And Brigid, talk a little bit about the testing that the frameworks did.
Yeah, so Harvard has been leading the way for 20 years on this. They were one of the first institutions to run with this information, and they set up the Center on the Developing Child, and they brought experts from all around the world, neuroscientists, child psychologists, child psychiatrists. They got so excited by this 20 years ago, and they started really supporting the scientific side of it, and they thought, well, this is going to change the world. Science is going to prove all this. But what happened was they started to spread the information, and what they realized is that this information isn't dropping in to the people. They're not getting it. They're not really getting that aha moment. So they actually set up the first Frameworks Institute in Harvard University. And it was set up with the intent. Their very first project was, how do we translate information on adverse childhood experiences and the impact of adversity on children? How do we translate that into a way? How do we communicate it to be understood? And they literally spent 10 years testing and retesting these metaphors. And they went out onto the street. They were active in Canada, in North America, and in the UK, testing these metaphors. And there's some amazing, they've come up with some really interesting findings. One of them was that 97% of the people they talked to had never really thought about child development and had no real interest in it. They said, not too complicated, too not, I don't know. And they came up with all these different theories, like, they're born, but some kids are just born bad, and damage done is damage done. And, all these people that they interviewed on the street, they got all the different, they call them swamp creatures, but they got all the things that are stopping the message from dropping in, from getting through and changing behavior. And they really thought, okay, what are the most powerful messagings that we can create to help people understand? And that's where the Frameworks Institute started. Now there's Framework UK, Framework Australia, Framework America, and they help people with messaging in all sorts of different ways. There's a frameworks document on public health. How do public health experts work with service providers to have the maximum impact, which is a really interesting one. There's one on upstream prevention of child abuse and neglect, just that specific one. You know, there's hundreds of them now. Frameworks work on lots of different things, but they started through Harvard on child adversity. So these metaphors are powerful, are well tested, and are now being implemented in Canada, America, and the UK, these specific metaphors, and we'd love to see them being implemented in Australia. And indeed, Frameworks Australia has started to use some of them. Yeah, so it's coming.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that background. Language is powerful. We talked about that. Help, support instead of help. Let's work with that. Brain architecture rather than early brain development is what they came up with. So we know that early experiences matter. Most people do recognise that, but, talking about the fact that brain architecture is being built literally like the building, the framework that goes up for a building, and that, what happens if that architecture is not put on a sturdy foundation? What happens to in the event of a building? Cracks appear. It can fall down. It's really unsafe. It becomes unsafe. So in the same way, the brain is building its architecture in the early years for everything that comes later in life. And when that brain architecture is impacted negatively, cracks appear. People become ill in adulthood from unresolved impacts at the stage of development where that brain architecture was being built. Brigid or Mike? I feel like I want to share this.
I'm going to let Mike do this. Mike.
Yeah, this is Mike.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's just because it's hot off the press. To all you people that are listening, last night I did I think maybe one of you has heard this already. Loretta has, but I was able to give an introduction, fire hose to the face talk to Rotary last night, and the biggest thrill I get is when you ask someone after the presentation is finished, what did you get out of it? And they tell you a story straight away that you go, wow, the pennies dropped. Now this was a doctor, Dr. John. I said to him, what would you tell people about it? Or as you walk out of the room, what would you say to the person, asked you, what did the speaker say last night? And he said straight away, I said, I got so much out of the fact that how important it is that that we're building a brain, the brain architecture thing, and that the serve and return was just a huge thing for him. And he didn't realize how powerful it was, to think, when he has his conversations with his grandchildren, how important they were. And that he was having weekly bike rides with his 4-year-old. And now he said it's brought new meaning to his conversations, realizing his responsibility as an adult to build that brain, And so, the serve and returns. And when I presented this last night, the word serve and return, I do get excited with the audience because I said it makes peekaboo so much more powerful. I use terms like that, and it's a great way to start a conversation with anyone. When you walk down the street and see a mom looking at her mobile phone and not doing the peekaboos and having the face-to-face with a child, those serve and returns, I don't look on judgment. I just look in terms of that parent says, I just say to myself, wow, that mom doesn't know yet, and so I intuitively start a conversation by, wow, what a beautiful child you have, and then begin the conversation about, did you know, and we go from there, and it's exciting because they don't know, and they go away with I'm going to look that up. And so I just encourage all of you. This metaphor is just gold. If we want to change the world, we need to change our environments for our children. And the first way we start, of course, is by better communication with our carer to child. And we're talking carer here. We're talking moms, dads and dads, moms and moms. All carers can make a difference when we interact with this in mind.
Yeah, there's science studies have been done, neurobiological changes in the brain of a parent before they become a parent, and in children, in babies. They're literally part of the human design is to seek interaction. So the child cries, or the babbling, the pointing, the interaction, any time at all that an adult responds to something that a child is doing or saying. Is building the brain. building brain. It's building a healthy brain and building attunement. So, you know, these are absolute foundations for future health, health and well-being, and quality relationships. You know, there's the ongoing
Can I say something?
social and emotional. Yes, yes.
And I was just going to say too, the other thing is to say that looking at the perspective of the child in all sorts of actions. So, you know, the child that might put their new shoes in a bucket of water, you know, looking at it as an experiment rather than something that's naughty, because lots of things that adults think are naughty are just an experiment. And that's how all activity, all behaviour in a child should be looked at is an experiment, a science experiment, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And just say, oh, now the shoes are wet, you know, rather than, oh my God. I tended to be like that with my daughter. I really loved the experience in those early years. Oh, thanks so much. Beautiful sharing. Brigid, I'll let you speak to this one.
Thank you, Sue. This is a really powerful slide to internalize. There's different types of stress, and what we define as positive stress is those everyday short stressful events that are actually good for us. They build our resilience. They help us to push out our limits and reach our potential. And certainly we need to be encouraging our children to cope with positive stresses, especially as a teacher. I see it every day in the classroom. You know, you got to go through a little bit of an uncomfortableness to grow and learn, and we all know that intuitively. Now, the really interesting two categories here is the tolerable stress and the toxic stress. And what I find really interesting is that the situation, the stressful situation, can be the same in both of these categories. The difference is the presence of a buffering, responsible adult. To me, that is just so powerful. You know, the tolerable stress are the tragic, unavoidable events that occur. We can't prevent that from happening. Every life has unavoidable hard things happen to us. But what we are in control of is being a buffering adult who can help that child. If these events prolong, and if the child feels alone and needing to cope with this alone, that event becomes the impact of that event becomes toxic. That cortisol, those stress hormones are ongoing. They cause damage to the brain. They cause damage to the body. They cause this ongoing hypervigilance. The key is having a buffering caregiver, and that's our responsibility. Yeah.
So the difference to the body's different responses, this is just a nice, easy illustration to show that the positive stress brings a person back to baseline virtually, and even tolerable stress. People can bring their stress, the sense of stress in the body back to a pretty balanced level. But with toxic stress, it's that ongoing. It becomes toxic because the stress response system stays switched on.
And you can see the examples there as well. That's physical and emotional abuse. That's someone more powerful in their life is not buffering. And not only do they have a toxic person in their life, but they don't have a responsible person strong enough to buffer that. Well, I wouldn't say strong enough, but they need that someone they can trust who can intervene and help them, support them. And again, exposure to violence, again, it's those boundary violations, that the child is in a situation where he or she doesn't have the control to get out of that situation. So therefore it's ongoing and no way to prevent it, and no one there to buffer from that ongoing toxic stress.
So that's the key here, is the buffering toxic stress. That's really the message we want to give you, because we use this term, we might hear this term. We do need to understand what toxic stress is, but it always goes hand in hand with this idea of buffering. And that's just the key. There's a science behind this, and those words on the screen just basically repeat what Brigid just said. But the science behind it, Brigid, with the lick your pups
Yeah.
experiment.
Yeah. It's just a really interesting experiment that they noticed that some rat mum, they had lab rats, and they saw that some rat mums spent a lot of time interacting with their pups, licking their pups, and that other mums didn't as much. And they analyzed the impact of this behavior on the pups, and they found that the pups that had been licked were a lot more relaxed. They were much more likely to explore, they were much more likely to play, they were much more likely to interact with other rats, whereas the pups that hadn't been licked and nurtured as much weren't, and they were more prone to stress response. Now, that behavior continued on through the generations. Generally the pup that wasn't licked much didn't lick her own pups much. However, they did an experiment where they took a pup that genetically was from a line that didn't lick their pups, and gave it to a pup mum that licked the pup a lot, and they changed that. Then when that pup grew up and had her own pups, she licked her pups more. So they actually changed the behavior. They were able to stop that intergenerational transmission. So they were able to intervene and change it for the better. Yeah.
So we like the idea that we include lick your pups as part of the new vernacular, part of the new phrasing. I'd like to just emphasise here, and we'll show, we'll move on, but this, even the impact of serious adversity, it says there, can interrupt that response before it turns toxic. And I was speaking to a young person the other day, a girl who's the 7th daughter, and her mother is really, really unwell physically and mentally. And she's been raised by her, but she's this incredibly strong young woman. And I said, the first thing we all say is, well, who was it? Who buffered? And she had her dad. Her sisters didn't have their father, but one of her sisters became determined to change for the next generation, and her son is having the most caring, loving upbringing from a young mum. But yeah, this girl has her dad, and so she's grown up in a house with an incredible number of aces, but she's been buffered. And so she's okay, and in fact probably stronger, because she has that awareness and understanding of the impact of toxic stress, as well as what it means, even more significantly, to have a buffering person. This, not only what happens in this lifetime, but many of you probably are aware of epigenetics, but let's just go through this briefly as well.
So epigenetics, they're biological processes. So I'll just talk a little bit about it, that when the genes are transmitted with the information for the next generation, genes can take a long time to change. Mutations, they're called mutations, and they can take many generations to cause changes. But what they found was that experiences that are threatening, that can cause someone to feel like that their life is in danger, they now may cause almost instant changes in the how the genes are expressed, and those changes can happen in the sperm and the egg for next generation. So for someone to go through a really frightening experience, that can actually change the expression for their children and their children's children. Not the gene itself doesn't change, all the different potentials are still there, but the how it's expressed changes. It's turned on or turned off, and that can be for positive and for negative. So they can switch. When we heal and integrate and live in a safer a society that feels safer and more welcoming, we have biological changes in our bodies that can impact then if we have children, if we're of childbearing age and we have children, for a positive way, so that our children are born less hypervigilant and more able to relax and pay attention and learn and interact and form positive relationships. So they did experiments on mice, and they took male mice and they put them in a cage. They electrified the base of the cage. When they exposed the mice to the smell of cherry blossom, they also gave them an electric shock. And then they took those, they bred the male mice. They took the offspring. They then bred the offspring. So it was the second generation. And then when they exposed the second generation to the smell of cherry blossom, they had a severe stress response to it. Now that second generation had no contact whatsoever, no physical contact with their grandfathers who had originally been exposed to that electric shock. So there's more and more research coming to the fore that yes, there are epigenetic processes taking place all the time. We are impacting, echoing down through generations, which makes sense for our survival. We obviously want to give our next generation the optimum chance of surviving in whatever environment, whether that's a positive environment or a threatening, frightful environment. We just want them to survive the best possible way. Yeah.
So the implications for the work that TANA's doing is we're about creating a safe, stable, nurturing environment wherever possible, because we want to keep those stress response genes turned off in the people that we're interacting with as much as we want them kept turned off in us. And we want to support that positive, we want to support and grow the belief and understanding that is that we are affected that we are affected by our environment. My brain's going faster than my mouth. Now, the other implication is that we cannot blame. We cannot blame. There's still a tendency for people to say, oh, her parents, the girl who I spoke about just before, she said to me, oh, no, my mum's bipolar and she's this and she has these outbursts and she blames me for everything. And I said, what happened? What's your mum's story? And she went, oh my gosh, she was born in Lebanon and she was abandoned at 6 months and this and that. The list goes on for this story. So she could really appreciate her mum's story, but also her own. So there's no room for blame because everybody's story is so complex and we're just never going to know it. And we're never going to know what, each person's sort of purpose is either, or what they have to do in a life. It's everybody's got that unique story. So TANA really does advocate for a no blame and no shame attitude. One of the implications of toxic stress, I'll let you continue, Brigid. Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So what did you want me to
just introduce the air traffic control?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Another beautiful metaphor here is the metaphor of air traffic control. They actually tested quite a few different metaphors to explain the executive functioning, and they really found that the air traffic control metaphor resonated really well with the public. We can all imagine the stress that must be involved in working in what's it called? That tower in an airport with everybody coming and going and airplanes coming left, right, and center. That so much to take in, and people that resonated with people. So I think that if we can understand that when we are living with that stress, that toxic stress of adversity, the executive function can almost shut down. It's certainly not at its optimum. The focus is on survival and flight, fight, freeze, fawn. There isn't that focus on the higher functioning. That focused attention, the problem solving, the really the parts that differ us in our brain from the primates. Whereas if we can improve air traffic control, and I know from school talking to students, they really grasp intuitively that if I'm really focused on this emotions of survival, I find it really hard to switch into learning. And in the same way, executive function and self-regulation skills can be built at any point in the lifetime. So we talk about that self-regulation and the feeling of being safe, being able to switch off that threat response system, and then being able to focus on the details, the executive function details. So that's a metaphor that really resonates with people about, okay, let's switch on your air traffic control and let's try and manage all these overwhelming stressors that could potentially be coming into your life.
Yeah. And we do that through doing everything in our power to create safe, stable, nurturing relationships. That's how we help switch that back on. Child adversity is solvable. Very, very important message. And again, so our response to everybody really does matter. Even if it comes to having a response that we'd rather not have and catching ourselves later and apologising, you know, our response in and building those relationships, making that a priority. Particularly, obviously, we've said it again, this power of buffering any kind of experience of adversity is essential. Positive outcomes can occur despite negative experiences. Please take that away. No matter, and we'll show you a little graph of an experiment that really shows that in a moment. And resilience is built through protective experiences. Positive and protective experiences build resilience and the capacity to handle those stressors, like we just saw in the little image of the air traffic control. The air traffic control can be built, but that executive function won't switch on if there's a state of overload of stress. So it's that constant dance of doing what we can to calm ourselves, to calm our environment, and then we can progress to those higher order thinking skills. We can have the conversation, we can resolve the problem, we can negotiate a solution, we can have delayed gratification, whatever it may be. At that higher level of functioning, we can come up with solutions, we can think about what we want, we can aspire for our lives, for ourselves. We can't do that when we're stuck in survival mode. So again, a community response will make it solvable and promote resilience. Brigid?
Fantastic. So the HOPE framework, the latest is happening. The latest research has moved on from adverse childhood experiences to positive childhood experiences. In the last 4 years, independently, different scientists have come up with this research. Some people call it benevolent childhood experiences, some people call it protective, some people call it positive. But all in all, what they found out is that children who've been exposed to adversity, if they are concurrently experiencing positive childhood experiences, well, that is actually negating the massive amount of the impact of the adverse childhood experiences. So the HOPE framework. So Sue, there's just a black box on the screen covering it up there. I'm not sure what that is.
Sorry, I just saw a message from
yeah.
you.
So there's the HOPE framework has taken the latest information that's only come out in the last 2 or 3 years and put it into a framework of what we can do. Now we do have a handout that I think if we could share that link, Sue, with people, you know, once we're finished. So this is a really nice way of what can we do. We can work on our relationships with. We can model positive relationships. We can create that safe, stable, nurturing environment. We can really with intent, create a safe environment and keep it safe, keep it feeling safe, that feeling of felt safety. We can make sure that our children are engaged. So they're developing connections in the community at all different places and different people and different contexts, involved in social civil activities, and then so opportunities for social engagement and development. And we can mentor them through these activities. And it's simple, but it's actually as a result of a lot of research. There's a lot of research went into that hope framework, and it's interestingly, China has actually taken on board the positive childhood experiences and are investing millions of dollars in it. I mean, Chinese, there's a lot of money going into it in China. They're really excited by the positive childhood experiences, and they're investing in a lot of research into it to improve their the mental health, the emotional mental health of their children in China. So I thought, isn't that an interesting aside? Because they do keep an eye on Western psychology, and they have shown quite an interest in the ACEs, but a real huge interest in the positive of what they can do for the children to improve outcomes for them there. So this is something that that's really important. Sue, do you have the slide yet? The next slide, please.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, so this is a particular one that I love to share. Just explaining this graph. So if we look at along the y-axis, you've got the percent of grown-ups with depression or poor mental health, and then along the bottom, you can see that those with no ACEs, they're roughly about a 10% chance that when they are grown-ups, they'll have poor mental health. So, but then you can also see there that there's with one ACE, the different colors. So you can see that even with just one ACE, the probability of depression or poor mental health jumps significantly. And then you can see that it's starting to build up. And I know 2 to 3 ACEs, a little bit more. And then you can see there 4 to 8 ACEs. It's jumping from a 11% right up to a 60% chance of depression. However, you can see that with so that's the 4 to 8 ACEs there, the different colors, but you can see there with the positive childhood experiences, you can see the buffering impact of all these positive childhood experiences. So if you look there, the difference between 10.5 for someone who's got lots and lots of positive childhood experiences and no ACEs, it up to 20.7. So they have narrowed that gap. Can you see the power of the positive childhood experiences to narrow that gap from almost a 60% chance of depression or poor mental health right down to a 20% chance? And that's the difference there, is the 6 to 7 positive childhood experiences. And you can see there's almost a dose response there, that the more positive experiences you create for this child, the more the more resilience and the more inoculation against depression and poor mental health. So that's the power of these positive experiences. So they seem quite obvious, but now we have the science to say they are very, very powerful for the future health of this generation. Yeah.
Just to add a context to that, I was speaking at a Rotary recently, and one of the questions at the end was, this is I didn't reach the point of positive, I don't think, but we've got these kids going to school hungry and having all these experiences, and we can create a positive experience at school, but then they've got to go home to that. But the science is showing us that it can help significantly if they have someone who believes in them, if they have someone in their life. Even if we can't take children out of that stressful situation, perhaps the role that we have is that one time that there's one person out there that really believes me. I know this person really sees me. They really respond to me. They really it feels really good being with this person. That calms the stress response in that child for that time. and it all helps. That's the power of this research. And just to contextualise that further, we've got the very recent publication of the the Healthy Tasmania new strategic plan. And you can see it's recommended to have a look through that because so many of you work in this field, but they've expanded. So the vision is there in the centre. The focus areas that are impacted, that TANA could have an impact in, they talk about priority populations. We talk about universal precaution, universal method of everybody gets this information, and we don't just focus on the targeted populations, but we appreciate that there's targeted need. Health literacy, using these metaphors helps to create a language that people can use broadly, that everybody who's interacting with somebody in the system who has, a dozen service providers hears the same language about serve and return interactions and air traffic control switching on and off and brain architecture being built and being looked after. So that can be part of the health literacy focus. Obviously, mental health and well-being, just having this awareness really does, we believe, we want to see it proven, bring about behaviour change. Maybe I might ask you to share a little story in a minute, Brigid, if we have time. But yeah, just seeing where this fits in the broader context of what the Tasmanian government's just released. These active living, eating well, smoke-free communities, reducing alcohol-related harm, these things are... we know from the science that there's a lot of these health behaviours or behaviours that impact negatively on health and then lead to these long-term diseases. There is an underpinning, and it is relating to this trauma, this unresolved trauma. So again, it's missing from the document here, but Jeremy Rockliff's definitely aware of it, and promoting community decision making for our ways of working. We want to lead to enable change. We want to work across government and communities. We want to promote community decision making, build capacity. We want to help people understand the science. People who might think that they're not smart because they didn't do well at school. Well, part of what we want to do is help build that awareness and perhaps reach people where they're at, but also introduce them to words and language that they might not have used before to help empower them in their ability to communicate more effectively, because that's empowerment, that's confidence building. So we do see where we fit here and then the outcome obviously is a healthier population. It's got to be inevitable. The more we're building these social connections and teaching people about what is the underlying problem in the first place. And it's encapsulated beautifully in this very short video that we would recommend you go to Nadine Burke-Harris wherever possible. For the purpose of not mucking up the technology, I'm just going to leave it small on the screen and encourage you to have a look again later.
Childhood is a critical period of life. Those growing brains are working hard to make sense of each new moment and store things away for later. When a child experiences adversity, that critical development can be compromised in the moment and throughout their lives. Fortunately, just as adverse experiences can harm, positive experiences can heal and change the course of a child's life. Even one caring adult can help to create a safe and predictable environment, help a child to build coping skills, and foster resiliency. When adults are present in the moment, when we listen without judgment, and when we encourage natural curiosity, we can strengthen their sense of safety and well-being. Positive childhood experiences extend beyond the home too. Teachers, coaches, and friends who care are powerful protective forces. And don't underestimate the power of community and culture. Traditions, teams, and clubs can help build a healthy sense of self that lasts into a thriving adulthood. It's never too late to care for a child and help put them on the path to a healthy future.
So, a beautiful little capture there. Nadine Burke-Harris, if you haven't written that down. We'll talk about her a bit more in a moment. But just to finish, the essential message is that we become stronger as a community when we're aware. And really, we know this is a root cause to so many of our problems. It underpins. It's not going to solve everything immediately, but what it does is address the root cause so that solutions can be heard and seen and accepted when they do come up. Because when this is in the way, that executive function can't even receive the message. It switches off. So that's the power. So, and there's science. There's so much science around this now, and that's, you know, we've got to use that to equip us with solving these complex problems. So we've reinvented the gears working together for the common good. We've started the TANA community of care. We had our first meetings in March, and we know, like you can talk about the population of people with ACEs as was in that position in the ANDA model, but looking at the solution now that the community of care model, which is made up of a community of practice of practitioners and a community of interest coming together. So anyone in the community who just wants to talk about it, who wants to find a place where they can have an understanding voice to tell their own story, you know, we bring that together under the umbrella of community of care. We do see that the sharper, you know, the cogs are going to be made sharper and going to be sharpened and kept more effortlessly moving together in this gear of our society when we have greater awareness, which leads to greater levels of caring. So if you would like to, we would encourage you to go to tana.net.au, and you'll see on the front page of the website the opportunity to become a supporter, become part of that collective voice for the community of care. And we'd love you to come online or in person to the next meeting. We have your contact details as part of your registration. So if you're happy for us to email you, we will. And invite you to get involved and just be part of it. Just be another number in this organisation that we can become a more powerful collective voice. And we're also looking for more active TANA members. We know that you have absolute gold to share, and you know, just that we all do our little bit is what is going to bring about the change we all seek. So that's where we've come to with the presentation, and fortunately have got time for some feedback and a little bit more dialogue and hearing back from you before we part ways at 12 o'clock. If you have a phone handy, I'd ask if you could just hold up your camera to the QR code and give us that feedback as part of our evaluation for the Catholic Care Grant, and let us know how you've received today's presentation. It was set up for the Burnie, I've had a technical issue there, so you'll see that it says Burnie Workshop 1, but just read that as Burnie Online Forum. The questions are the same and the answers and feedback are equally valuable. If you're able to do that, we really, really appreciate that. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute because I haven't set this up to see you. So has everyone got that QR code? Yep. I'll just give you a few minutes there. Oh, skip advertisement. We've found that an advertisement came up. If you do have the QR code, you just have to click skip advertisement for the QR generated that I used, and you'll see the Office 365 form with 10 questions, and half of them are just a rating and short response. if you're able to ignore me, I'll just share quietly. We've had an apology from Kate, really appreciates the thought-provoking presentation. She's interested as a community dietitian in learning more about how our public health messaging can be most effective and resonate with our I've had a look. Community without causing unintended harm or judgment. That's right. That's why we are advocating for common language. Sharon's just saw a clip on how Chinese people are refusing to have children as a protest against government controls. Oh, there's so much going on with such a huge population. Interestingly, they're saying that my family line stops with me or something similar.
Wow. That's incredible.
Loretta, thank you. That's very powerful, Brigid.
Thank you, Loretta. Yeah.
It's the power for sure.
Wonderful
to hear the science.
Like in any children's learning, like to make it a positive experience. I know just here at the library, like I try and make every like school group or any event for children really positive experience. So when they grow up and remember libraries, they're going to come into the library and bring their families in. I know when I was growing up, when I was little, libraries wasn't a positive experience for myself because it was always shush, quiet, or if you were in trouble at school, you went to the library, or if it was raining, you went to the library, and it wasn't like an enthusiastic librarian or anything like that. And so I don't want children to have that same experience. I want it to be quite memorable, and they'll keep coming in.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Thank you for being that.
Yeah. Positive, buffering.
Yeah, on behalf of all those kids who aren't aware of what you're doing for them, we thank you. Interestingly, there are very close links to the needs for the first 1,000 days. Absolutely, pregnancy to 2, just the nutrition stuff missing, relationship cues, environment, and breaking cycles of stress.
Yeah. It's heartening how it's all coming together. Yeah, it's beautiful.
There will always be a flow-on effect when you start with the self-awareness, and the awareness of others. It just automatically, you want to know more and understand more because you just do.
Oprah Winfrey just released a book with Bruce Perry, What Happened to You, which is the question, instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you. I've just shortened that at school to what's happened. I just say what's happened with teenagers if I see they're upset. And honestly, it can be it's so easy to misinterpret, that there can be some kind of outburst or crazy thing that can happen. And, you ask just what's happened, not like what's wrong. And often it'll be completely unrelated. I was at a school once where a girl was, the senior teacher had said to me, can she just sit in your room? I wasn't on class. She's, lost 11 kilos in 2 weeks and is having a lot of trouble, refusing and all this sort of thing. Like, it was about her behaviour and her eating. And when I went in and asked her what's happened, she said, my grandma died, and, and I didn't get to say goodbye. It was something else completely that was really at the fore of her mind that was behind this. It's just so interesting. It's such a powerful. So the quote that we have in another presentation from Oprah and Bruce Perry is thousands of small positive experiences have a therapeutic effect. So Loretta, every time that a child goes to the library and looks forward to it, or that one time that you smile at them when they get something right, or whatever it is, like that's therapy. Absolutely. We don't have to be therapists to be therapeutic.
So is there something that you want to say and do before we've got 4 or 5 minutes? I just feel like I need to say something, but I don't want to interrupt your flow.
This was just kind of open for people to share at the end, and we've asked, if you can join TANA and just come along to our Wisdom of Trauma movie event. You'll see that on the website. There's 300 places available in person at the Gateway in Devonport, because they have a great setup already for live streaming. So we can live stream it as well, up to 100 people, because that's our Zoom account at the moment. So we have a panel of experts to speak about this and take questions at the end of it. So highly recommend, and if you could disseminate that through your networks and come along, or get people to sign up to join us at the live stream. We'd love to see a capacity crowd so that more people have awareness. Mike, it's all yours.
I'm really specifically now speaking to Meg, to Chandel, Loretta, and Sharon. The rest of you are kind of aware of where to from here in terms of TANA. What we want from you people is to just straight away just go, we'd love you to say, yep, believe in what you're doing, and just go tell others. That's, of course, the thing. But when all said and done, from time to time, we're going to ask for collaboration in our community, and it might be in your area. And how you support us would be amazing if you could spread the word that we're having an event, but consider yourself a supporter all the time, because we will support what you're doing in a way. We want you to think about how could TANA embellish or be a part of what we're doing, for this particular campaign. Loretta, at the library, you might be having guest speakers from time to time. If you do that, we would love to do something on a regular basis. Our organization now wants to go up another level, where our volunteers get trained to present. And we want to mobilize that resource, because that's how we're going to do it, with volunteers. But we will have a funding base that will support that too. We want to be able to, like last night, I was hot off the press. I'm going to engage into a restaurant in East Devonport that will seat about 16 to 20 people, and we will get couples in there. And how we engage with them is like, say, I'm just pretending, Meg, you might know a bunch of families in that area, and you can tap someone on the shoulder. Hey, I think you and your husband would love a meal out. They've got a meal, bit of music's happening, and so and an interesting talk that I would love you to be a part of. You'll have some great conversation there. Would you consider going? We want you to support us, supporting and helping us to engage, because we have to do the after hours stuff. The work that the health promotion people do is all on hours. It's all time restricted. It's nowhere near as personal as what this needs to be. We need to build relationships out of hours. And so TANA and our volunteers, we are developing a base of people who believe in the after hours dedication that we're going to need to do. Pip Ray came with me last night. As busy as she is in the day, she said, I'll take some time out and I'll support you. And we went as volunteers to spread the word. We want to do that more and more. We want to go into the community in their way, the way they want to engage, because otherwise it's more of the same. We just do it. Oh, I'll make an appointment with such and such a health promotion. Go and see them, and they'll give us a few things to do. And there'll be some great relationships, but it won't be the conversations that we have on evenings like we just had last night. And I will finish on that, because that's what I hope that you would volunteer. Give us your permission to put us on, say, the community of care, or be on the community of care, so we can contact you and let you know what we're doing, or on our database, which we are now developing into a huge system that we can turn to and say, oh, in this area, we've got these people that are our stakeholders. We will engage with them and then go from there. That's where we're working to mobilize our volunteers. We need the support of the health promotion people, because they're the frontline people who know the people. But we know we need to re-engage with a different purpose, not purpose, it's always the same purpose, to help people improve their outcomes, but in a different way, more personal, more where those conversations can happen, where we can talk about our metaphors and use our things, where we can use the common language that Pete spoke of. We need to dumb down the science and get real with these people, and in a new way. And this is how we get the changes that county experienced after 14 years of It's going to be taking years, but if we can get a mindset of the people like the Rotary are already doing it. Now the Rotary people are engaging every day. Now, if they go out and do their little community things that they do and use these metaphors, they're already doing TANA work. It's just, and this is what we want to grow. Sports clubs is a huge area I want to get into. So thank you for that.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mike.
Mike.
Beautifully spoken. Beautifully spoken. Look, we've just gone over past the hour of 12. So thank you so much. Now, I was just wondering, Brigid, there's just one little story. If people need to hop off, please feel free. We love it. But there is one little story of a student who, yes, go to tana.net.au, Wendy, and I will also email you an invitation to Wisdom of Trauma movie. Definitely would love to see your class there, community services. Brigid, the story of the girl who, when she, just because what Mike's saying is the small conversations and what a difference they make. And yes, it can take time, but for some people, it's the moment that changes everything. Yeah, so maybe.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm just looking at
the
Sharon,
chat.
talking to everyone as well. There was this a few years ago. I was chatting to a lady, and I was explaining all this information to her, especially the latest about adverse childhood experiences, and she in turn passed that information on to her student. And this student was a young girl who had many aces in her life. When I came in to work with her, she was so excited to pass this information on to me. She said, you know, I have to share this with you, what my teacher told me about the impact of adversity, about how it's not my fault, you know. And she said, when I was 14, I had a miscarriage, and now I don't have a compulsion to have a baby, you know, to get pregnant again. I know the importance of setting up, of being ready to have a child. She goes, I understand now how I have to have a house and have security and stability before I become a parent. And she said it was freeing. She said it shifted so much in her just to understand this information about adversity. She was sharing it with everybody, including me, and she had no idea that I had been the person to tell her teacher. So it was heartening. It was really heartening. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Countless examples. You know, if anyone, we are looking at people to, you know, you're all bridging people. You all bridge between this information and other. So, you know, we'd like to see, we're in the process of setting up a system of train the trainer, so we can put a package together. If you come to something like this and you say, I'd love to share this more confidently with another group, I'd love to do what you're doing, do the presentation, that we would, you know, that's something that to sort of watch this space for, that we take, you know, people, and we run through a confidence building session with the delivery of a specific short program that you can take back into your organisations and be the one that shares it there. So there's all sorts of possibilities about coming, from public awareness campaign to education and training. And of course, if you see your local member out and about, ask them to support TANA.
Mm-hmm.
We need
hours ambassadors. That's what we're needing.
Yeah, good one, Kate. One more plug for a TANA fundraiser. If you put this in your diaries and contact me at mike@tana.net.au. We're having a house concert at my house in a yurt. There's 2 sessions, and it's half booked out already. June 26th, Sunday afternoon and evening. 2 sessions, June 26th, with 3 wonderful acts, Claire Ann Taylor, Colin Lilly, and my boys, Halfway to Fourth. So if you, thanks, Pete, you're already coming. I'm sorry, not Pete, well, not Pete's coming, but I know that
Billy
Tim's
is.
coming. Tim is. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I highly recommend a Lizotte house concert if you haven't been to one before.
Yeah.
Brilliant
I'm
music.
coming.
Oh,
Yay.
we hope to we'll probably raise over $2,000, and that virtually covers our insurances and our overheads for the year. So it's just a beautiful thing to have, and everyone has a good time. We mentioned a little bit about TANA, but really it's kind of TANA free for the evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for your participation, your presence, and for everything that you're doing that's good in the world.
And thank you to Catholic Care for making this all happen.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Be in touch. Reach out anytime. Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brigid.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.